Yeah, g'day YouTubers. Tinker O'Toole again here with another video. Today we're going to talk about axes, splitting axes and mauls. So you've got three different categories. First of all, we'll just rattle off some specifications so that you're pretty clear and you've got a bit of a general idea of what to look for. Now, most axes can be as low as 15 degrees and up to about 18 degrees. But generally 15 is probably the most common, with a beveled edge of about 30 degrees. So when we talk about the 15 degrees, we're talking about the main face of the axe, which is this part here. And when you look at it there, you can see that narrow, I think this is only about 12 degrees. But the bevel edge we're talking about, you can see that shiny little edge there. That's about 30 degrees. It's actually about 35 degrees on here. When I brought it brand new, it was more like 40 degrees. So that's your typical axe, and typically you've got a radius on them. You'll notice that on all axes you'll have this radius. Works really good because the highest point of the axe or splitting axe will touch in the middle first, provided you bring it down fairly straight. So that's your normal axe, and they come in different weights. This is only a 1 kilogram. The one at the back, which is made by Cyclone, that is your typical 2 kg axe. 5 1/4 inches across the blade, and if you actually have a look, that's more close to about 15 degrees. And I didn't like the edge it was on it, so I modified the edge on that. Virtually every axe that you buy in a hardware store won't be razor sharp. It'll be blunt. And that goes for splitting mauls and everything else. There's only two splitting axes that I've ever brought, and they're razor sharp. And that was the Estwing here. What a weapon that is. Look at that nice radius. And would you believe that's 42 degrees. So that's that one. And the other ones that are razor sharp, and they're always razor sharp, is the Fiskars. And we'll talk about that angle. Typically that's a 25 degree angle, and you've got 30 degree angle on that bevel. You can see that little edge there, it's about 5 millimeters. All Fiskars are like that, except for the maul, and we've got a Fiskars maul at the back there. So we'll move on to the splitting axes. What's different from a splitting axe to a normal axe? Well, generally the angle of the wedge is much bigger. It can start anywhere from 25 degrees to 30 degrees on the main. And we've got one here from Oxen Coffee in Germany. It's a still. And if we have a look at that, I think that's about 25 degrees. And we've got a beveled angle on there, probably of about over 35 degrees. So, and we've actually got the Fiskars maul at the back. This is the heaviest one of all. This is a bit of a beast. Look at that angle there. Huge angle. I had to reprofile this angle there, and we'll talk about angles. And that's the weight of the head, 3.6. It's got a total weight of 5 kg. Which is a pretty heavy. It's pretty heavy, that one. The one at the back's an 8 pounder, so that's 3.6 kilo too, with a total weight of about 4.6. Now there's another one. One thing about the splitting axes is it's got the much broader angle so that it doesn't get stuck into the timber. A normal axe like this one, or a axe like this with the narrow angle on it, works all right for splitting small timber. The moment you start to get into something fairly big, it'll get stuck. So that's why they developed a splitting axe. much broader angle. So if we were to look at an angle like that of about 15 degrees, and this is what 30 degrees looks like, and that's what 45 degrees looks like. So your splitting axe can vary, that wedge shape can vary anywhere from 25 degrees, 35 degrees, even up to 42 degrees on the est wing. So the next thing is the beveled edge, and you can see on the est wing, it's got about a 12mm beveled edge there. That beveled edge is, I think, I'll just check it, I think it was around about 30 degrees. It's very, very close to being about, yeah, look, it's around about the 30 degree, give or take a little bit. Now, the other thing that we didn't mention, we've also got mauls. Now, mauls are totally different, block splitters. The one from Cyclone, it's fairly basic. It's just a large wedge, essentially. It's 3.2 kilograms. Nothing fancy about it, but I can tell you what, it works. And little tiny beveled edge on there as well. Now, one thing that I didn't mention, that when we talk about angles, when we talk about the block splitters are generally the heaviest of all. Typically this one from Still uses this part as a sledgehammer. It's got a total weight of 4.6 kilograms. So the actual head weighs 3 kg, plus you've got the steel here, and that all puts it up, plus the handle. You'll notice that the width here is much smaller than a splitting axe, and it's still got a slight radius on top. Also, I had to re-profile the edge. Most of these axes, splitting axes, block splitters, all come blunt. I don't know why. They may work okay in Pinus radiata, but if you use a splitting axe, splitting maul, a block splitter in Australian hardwood, and it's got the wrong angle on it, it'll bounce off. So typically for your splitting axe, I like to have a 30-degree angle like that. For a splitting maul, I don't like to go any more than about a 45-degree angle. If you just have a look up there, there's a picture that I took of my hydraulic splitter. It does over 33 tonne, and you'll notice it's 45 degrees. So 45 degrees works okay. The other thing that happens with axes in the geometry, whether it's a splitting axe, a splitting maul, a normal axe, is this face, or referred to the cheeks, can have a bit of a hollow section, and I think you can see through the, just get my hand out of the way, you'll be able to see either side has that hollowed out section. Now the other thing is, even on top, it doesn't sit dead level. I'll just get my hand out of the way and you'll be able to see that a little bit better. So you can see that it's not flat. A lot of them are all like that. Even if we look at this, even this huge block splitter has a gap in between it like that. And would you believe, a little bit difficult to see, even the top of it is not flat. So if you put this on top, it's not flat. So a lot of them are like that, except for the Cyclone. That's as simple as what you're ever going to get. It is dead flat. There it is there. And across the top, it is also dead flat. Okay. So I've just shown you this one here, that the cheeks are hollowed out, and across the blade it's so this is convex and this is concave, whereas a cyclone block splitter is just dead flat. Does it make much difference? Look, if it does, it's that small, to me it's not even worth worrying about. There's only two things that really makes a good splitting axe, splitting maul, block splitter: the weight and the angle. The angle of the block splitter is generally over 30 degrees, as you saw on the S-wing. That's about 42 degrees. Pretty sure that the oxen cough, the split, is around about 30. A little bit less than 30 actually. And this one here is around about 20. Just have a look. Yeah, look, this one's about 20. That doesn't matter. What's really important is the beveled edge on them all. That beveled edge should be sharp for hardwood. Now, typically an axe, I said it can be anywhere, and I've seen them as low as about 11 degrees up to about 18 degrees. So 15 degrees is pretty common. Splitting axe, the main wedge is anywhere from 25 to 35 degrees, and the splitting maul could be anywhere from 30 to 42 degrees, give or take. There's no general rule because it depends on the timber that you're using. And let's just have a look at the timber for an instance. Okay, so Australian eucalypts, hardwood, have got very short fibres and they interlock. And if they're twisted, especially where there's a knot, forget it. You're better off getting a chainsaw and just making a Y piece and cutting it, because it's going to bounce off. So if you've got eucalyptus, and some of them are harder than others, and it's got short fibres, they're interlocking and they twist, it's going to be very, very difficult to bust that open. Whereas if you've got Pinus radiata, which has got longer fibres, they don't interlock as much, you could split that with virtually anything. Now you'll see many, many videos on YouTube where people using splitting mauls, block splitters, and they're just bouncing off large rounds. If you're going to split large rounds in excess of, say, 2 foot, you need to be splitting where the rings are. Where the rings are would be the easiest place to split. If you split in the middle, well, you're going to have a bit of a workout, unless you split in Pinus radiata. But if you've got really hard timber, work on the edges and go around the edges and work your way in from the edges. And that's how you should do it. Now, I don't like splitting on the ground. Splitting on the ground can be a little bit dangerous because the splitter or the splitting axe can come much closer to your feet, even though you've got work boots on, hopefully, and safety glasses and all the proper PPE. But I like to split on a log up to about just below my knee and place the log on there, and I'm only splitting logs probably over about 1 foot. And it's much safer that way. And the axe comes down. A lot of people make a mistake. When this comes in contact with the timber, have it horizontal, not like this. Don't want to be coming down like that. It doesn't work as effective. That's the same as an axe. When you chop into a tree, you try and make it so that this part here hits first, not there or not there. So all these splitting axes, mauls, all work better if they contact in the middle of the blade as it strikes. And keep them razor sharp. If anyone else tells you they don't need to be sharp, most likely they're splitting soft timber. So just to briefly recap, your axe main angle on here should be anywhere from 11 to 20 degrees maximum. Your splitting axe can be anywhere from about 25 degrees to about 30 degrees. Your splitting maul or block splitter can be anywhere. I've seen them as small as 25 degrees up to 42 degrees. Your beveled edge on here should be about 30 degrees, and on here it can be up to 45 degrees. I have seen block splitters, splitting axes, in the hardware store with over 90 degree angle on them. If you have a look here, there's a picture there, and all that's going to do is bounce off the timber. You may split soft timber, but I can tell you what, you've got no hope in hell in splitting hard timber with a bevel in excess of 90 degrees. So my best advice is, in the first place, don't buy anything that's got a huge bevel on it like that, 90 degrees. Do a little bit of research, go into the shop, check your bevel, make sure that your bevel is, if it's an axe, it should be 30 degrees. It should still be around 30 degrees on a splitting axe or a splitting maul, but it depends on the angle there. So obviously if that angle is over 30 degrees, you would find that the bevel angle would be 40 or 45 degrees. I don't like to go over any more than 45 degrees on this beveled angle here, because I find out it's harder to penetrate. So if you've got a 30 degree angle, and we'll just put that up again, that's a 30 degree angle. When you strike the timber, that will go into the timber a hell of a lot easier than a 45 degree angle. So that's a 45. That's going to be harder for that to penetrate. Now, even if you have a 45 degree angle, you would like to make sure that it's probably no more than about 2 millimeters. You may come across the terminology micro bevel. All of that means that it's a very, very small bevel. It could only be a millimeter. This one's got about 1.5 mils. You can barely see it. But there is a slight beveled edge on there. So if you do come across that word micro bevel, that's what they'll be referring to. The other thing is, when you're finished using your splitting axes or splitting mauls, it's a good idea to run a bit of oil over them, put them away in storage, because once they start rusting up, you'll lose the edge and you'll have to resharpen them again. Now, when you do resharpen them, they do sharpen up very, very sharp. I use a raker file, works really good. A raker file is quite hard, and you can get a beautiful sharp edge just using a raker file. Or if you want to buy a double cut file, there's all different files that are out there. Some files will do finer than others, some will take a bit more than others. It depends on the cut. But nonetheless, you can sharpen an axe edge with a file, and a lot of people do, and you get brilliant results. After I use a file, I then get the oil stone. I go over it with an oil stone and then a leather strop. A leather strop is just, I've got a leather belt, I cut a piece off. It was an old belt, didn't use it anymore. Stick it to a bit of timber. When you run that leather that way, so imagine this was a leather strop, a bit wider, and you just push it down that way on both sides. It removes those little micro little edges, those little sharp edges, and makes the edge even sharper. So I hope you enjoyed that video about the different mauls, the different angles. Just be aware, the most important part is the little beveled edge right on the edge, and try and keep it anywhere between 30 and 40 degrees, and you'll have no problems in cutting. The narrower the angle, the easier it is to penetrate the wood. So that's my advice. Go for the narrowest angle possible, but don't go under 30 degrees. If you have an axe and you didn't have a 30 degree bevel on it, what would happen, and if we look at this, if you were to have that thin angle all the way to the edge, when you strike hardwood, it would tend to damage the edge and even fold over. So you must make sure that you do have a beveled edge on there, but you don't have anything greater than about 45 degrees on a splitting maul. Fiskars use 30 degrees and they are razor sharp and they really do work good. So that's my best advice. 30 degrees is optimal, but in some cases you may not be able to get 30 degrees because the angle could be much greater than 30 degrees, so you're going to have to go. An example would be, if this was 35 degrees, then I would go for a 45 degree angle on here. But I wouldn't have a huge angle, maybe 1 millimetre, maximum 2 millimetres, maybe, between 1 and 2. Anyway, thanks for watching. Bye for now.